Good morning, America. How are ya? Monday morning rail will be 500 miles before the day is done. Hi, I'm Denny Jelsma, and I'm at the world-famous Jacksonville Terminal Railroad Museum, and today is Monday, and you know what we do on Monday? It's show and tell, and show and tell starts right now. Show and tell this morning is extremely exciting to me. We're going to talk about the Chicago, Burlington, Quincy, Denver and Rio Grande, and Western Pacific's California Zephyr. This was the second train that I ever rode in my life, but it's an exciting train, it has a lot of history, and we're going to show you a sample of the Cal Zephyr that we have here at the Jacksonville Terminal Railroad Museum when we run on our off days of running phototopic trains. First of all, I'd like to explain to you how the California Zephyr came about. In 1945, a General Motors executive was riding in the cab of a Rio Grande in Glenwood Springs Canyon. And he was looking up out of the engine and he said, wow, wouldn't it be nice if the traveling public could see what I could see? And he got a piece of paper and he made a drawing of a dome. Now, the domes were not really kind of new because Canadian Pacific had a few where they took their top of a caboose and made it very large, and this was very, very antiquated. But they went back and he gave it to the president of the Burlington Railroad and said, here, what do you think of this idea? And so the president went to his mechanical department, and in Aurora, Illinois, in the late 1945, they came up with the first dome, and it is right here. It's called the Silver Dome. And they took a regular passenger car, gutted it, and you could see how everything is squared off. And this was their kind of experiment. And they had to have the floor to kind of go down so you could walk underneath the dome. And there wasn't a lot of room in the dome. And then they later added the tinted glass because it got so hot there. And so they first tried this out on a train that was called the Exposition Flyer, and it ran from Chicago to San Francisco. And it was so popular, and everybody loved this car because here this train was all heavyweights, and then they had one stainless steel, and then it had a dome, and it was just unheard of. And it became so popular, a couple of years later, they made another one. They got another car, and they stripped it, and it was called the Silver Castle. And so these two cars later on ended up running on the Burlington's train from Minneapolis to Chicago, and they ran for years and years all the way up to the end of Amtrak. But anyhow, that was the original domes, and then the Train of Tomorrow that General Motors introduced was here again. It ran all over the United States on tour, and it was exciting. And then in 1949, the Bud Company made a 11-car set, and the Burlington, the Rio Grande, and the Western Pacific entered into an agreement that they would run this train, and it was about 50 hours. It averaged 50 miles an hour. And so I know, growing up in the cornfields of Iowa, I would see this train and it would be hitting 90 to 100 miles an hour. And in the flats of Nebraska, in the middle of the night, it would go over 110 miles an hour. Now, when it got into Rio Grande territory, in the mountains, it would, we were going 30, 40 miles an hour. And then when it got into Utah, on the flats, it would really haul. But this was a luxurious train, the first American truly streamliner that was designed to go after the vacationer and be a luxury train. Now, there was a lot of luxury trains, and the Cal Zephyr didn't have a lot of the amenities with, say, the 20th century of the Broadway. They didn't have barber shops and this, but they still had, they had nurses on. And this train, as you could see when it first came out, the Burlington used F3s, and you see the steam generator, and they used this for a couple of years, and then they went to using their E7s to pull this train. When it got into Denver, the Rio Grande took it. They had silver painted PAs, and they finally went to using the 4-axle F units, and then the Western Pacific picked it up at Salt Lake City, and they had FP7s, A's, and F7Bs, and they were stainless steel and just a gorgeous, gorgeous train. And then this train had a total of 5 domes, and they used 3 sets each way to cover 2,500 miles in 50 hours. And it left Chicago at 3:30, and in 1963, I got on the Nebraska Zephyr in Ottumwa, Iowa, rode 50 miles to the east of Mount Pleasant, got off, waited an hour, and got on the Cal Zephyr back to Ottumwa, and the fare was $1.25 each way. And boy, I still remember that was the greatest thrill that I've had of riding the Nebraska Zephyr and then the Cal Zephyr. But the Cal Zephyr had 5 domes, and they had a trading partner that you could get on a train in New York City, and the Pennsylvania provided this train car, and it said Pennsylvania on it. They also had a trading partner with the New York Central, but it wasn't lettered for the New York Central. And the observation cars was very unique on the Cal Zephyr, and these were famous, and these are still running today, and they were just absolutely gorgeous cars. Now, they're not running on Amtrak, but they're all privately owned now. And so the Cal Zephyr was a train that started the dome process throughout the United States. After the Cal Zephyr was introduced, and it was so popular that the Great Northern put it on the Empire Builder. The Northern Pacific came along with their domes, and even the Baltimore and Ohio got into the domes that they used on the east, but they were limited because of certain areas that they couldn't go under bridges and through certain tunnels. But the Cal Zephyr was the train that set it all off. And what a beautiful train. 5 domes, heavy in the sleepers. The Cal Zephyr did not have a single coach. It was coach domes. So if you wanted to go coach, you could, but it was in a dome car, and it was very unique. And the dining car was very unique. And it had a San Francisco trolley in it, and the whole theme was that you could see America through this gorgeous train, and through the flatlands of Illinois and Iowa and Nebraska was during the night, and you got to go through the mountains in Colorado during the daytime. You crossed the desert of Nevada in the night, and you woke up and you were on the Feather River, and you got into Oakland, and then you took a ferry from Oakland to cross into San Francisco. But the Cal Zephyr was the one that started the dome streamliners, and it was just an absolutely gorgeous train, and I feel so lucky that I was able to ride it. I rode it quite a few times from Ottumwa, Iowa into Chicago, and I also in 1970, it lasted almost 20 years. The Denver and Rio Grande ran it from Denver to Salt Lake as the Rio Grande Zephyr. And what was kind of neat about the Rio Grande Zephyr, they took the Cal Zephyr lettering off and just had Rio Grande. And they kept their particular cars. And they ran that. Actually, they did not join Amtrak. There were three major railroads that didn't join Amtrak. That was the Rio Grande, the Rock Island, and the Southern. And so the Rio Grande ran the train from Denver to Salt Lake, I believe till 1974 or something like that. Then Amtrak did take it over, and today Amtrak leaves Chicago at 2:30 instead of the 3:30. It doesn't run quite as fast as what the original Cal Zephyr ran, and in my opinion, it's just not the same train, but it's still a very nice train. I have ridden the California Zephyr in Amtrak, but naturally I prefer the original Cal Zephyr of the three major railroads. And that's what we have for show and tell here at the world famous Jacksonville Terminal Railroad Museum in beautiful Jacksonville, Florida.